Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to Curious Kingdom. Today we are recapping fantasy horror movie The Box. The movie begins with the appearance of a CIA memo on the screen, which states that a man named Arlington Stewart, who had suffered severe burn injuries, has now become involved in delivering unidentified units to a newly established Mars project. The story takes place in 1976 and starts with a married couple, Norma and Arthur, waking up at 5:45 a.m. to the sound of the doorbell. Norma goes downstairs and glimpses a black car driving away through the peephole. Upon opening the door, she discovers a package left on their doorstep. Arthur and Norma open the package at the table, revealing a black wooden box containing a red button protected by a glass dome. The box is locked and accompanied by a fancy note stating that a man named Mr. Stewart will arrive at 5 p.m. Since they are unfamiliar with Mr. Stewart, the couple proceeds with breakfast, joined by their son Walter. Later, Norma sees Arthur leaving to go to his workplace, NASA Langley Research Center. Arthur is involved in designing cameras for the Viking Mars probe. Norma teaches literature at an elite private school, where she discusses different versions of hell with his students. During a class, one student mocks Norma's limp, prompting her to reluctantly reveal her disfigured foot with 4 missing toes. After the class, Norma is called to the dean's office, where she learns that the faculty discount for their son's tuition has been canceled. The news leaves Norma speechless, but the dean seems unconcerned about her distress. As Norma returns home, she realizes that paying the bills will become more challenging. When someone rings the doorbell, Norma opens the door and is shocked to see an elderly man in his 70s wearing a hat, with half of his lower face missing. He introduces himself as Arlington Stewart. While Norma reacts with astonishment, Arlington remains remarkably composed and makes an offer. Arlington unlocks the box and explains that if either Norma or Arthur pushes the button, someone they don't know will die, but they will receive $1 million in cash. Norma is amazed as she looks at the briefcase full of money in front of her. Even if she rejects the offer, Arlington hands her a $100 bill, allowing her to keep it. Norma inquires about Arlington's employers, but he informs her that he cannot share any information about them. He insists that Norma and Arthur keep the details of the offer private, and they have 24 hours to make a decision. Arlington will return the next day at the same time to retrieve the button unit if they refuse. Otherwise, the box will be reprogrammed, and the offer will be made to someone else. Meanwhile, Arthur's coworkers inquire about Norma's limp, so he explains what happened. Norma's foot was injured when her brother accidentally dropped a barbell on it. She went to the hospital, where her foot was exposed to excessive radiation due to the doctor's negligence. Her tissues were severely damaged, leading to the family suing the doctor and winning $10,000 as compensation. In another event, Arthur receives a letter from the astronaut corps, which he had been eagerly waiting for, hoping to be selected as one of the astronauts for the Mars mission. However, his excitement turns to disappointment when he reveals that he has been rejected due to failing the psychological exam. Arthur cannot accept this, as he had performed well in all the other exams. Arthur and other higher officials contact the astronaut corps to inquire about the rejection, only to discover that Arthur indeed failed the psychological assessment. Arthur returns home devastated, but Norma distracts him from his troubles by recounting her encounter with Arlington. However, Arthur remains skeptical that a man with a half of his face missing would make such an offer. Nevertheless, Arthur instructs Norma to get ready as they are running late for a play. Before leaving, Norma locks the button unit in the basement and leaves their son Walter in the care of their babysitter, Dana. After the play, Arthur and Norma discuss various reasons why Arlington would present them with this deal, but none of their ideas seem plausible. They return home still puzzled. Arthur, driven by curiosity, tinkers with the button unit at home, only to find it empty. There is no transmission or sound, leading him to believe that Arlington would never know if they pressed the button. While in bed, Norma cannot help but share how the $1 million could significantly improve their lives. The following day, an employee at NASA rushes home after receiving news that his daughter has been taken. Later that day, Arthur verifies the authenticity of the $100 bill and starts believing that the offer might be genuine. He asks Norma if she is prepared to take responsibility for someone's death, even if they remain unaware of the person's identity. However, in a sudden motion, Norma jerks forward and pushes the button slightly, succumbing to the temptation. In a distressing incident, a 911 call reveals that someone has been shot. The police swiftly arrive at the given address and discover a woman who has been fatally wounded in the heart, as well as a terrified little girl locked in an upstairs bathroom later that afternoon. Arlington reappears and presents the couple with a briefcase containing $1 million. Arlington confirms that someone has died prior to retrieving the button unit and explains that the offer will now be extended to someone else. Following this, Arlington departs, but Arthur pursues him to return the money. However, Arlington adamantly refuses to accept it, citing that the button has already been pushed. The couple watches as Arlington drives away, but Arthur manages to memorize his license plate. Acting swiftly, Arthur securely places the briefcase in the safe just as Walter arrives home from school. Meanwhile, at a police station, the officers report that the deceased wife's husband, Jeffrey, works as a rocket scientist for NASA. Later in the day, Arthur attempts to divert Norma's attention from the Arlington situation by gifting her a custom-made prosthetic foot, allowing her to walk without a limb. They then attend the rehearsal dinner for Norma's sister's wedding, hosted by Norma's father. During the rehearsal, Arthur is instructed by Norma's father to choose a gift from a table. As Arthur approaches, he recognizes a waiter who turns out to be the same student who had previously humiliated Norma, taunting him with a hand gesture. Although puzzled, Arthur opens a box from the table, revealing a photograph of Arlington. Despite feeling disturbed, the couple pretends to be composed throughout the rehearsal. Meanwhile, Dana hides, visibly startled when an unknown person suddenly appears outside the window, observing them. She requests Walter to take her to the basement to show her Arthur's collection. While exploring, Dana notices a photograph featuring everyone involved in the camera's development for the Viking Mars project, among whom Arlington is depicted. During the rehearsal, Arthur requests Norma's father, a police officer, to run a background check on Arlington's license plate. Arthur fabricates concerns about a car that has been suspiciously lurking near their house, expressing his desire to ensure the safety of his family. Later, Norma's sister informs Arthur that the peculiar waiter he encountered is actually Norma's student, the same person who had previously humiliated her and made fun of her foot. Around the same time, Norma follows the waiter, who suddenly experiences a nosebleed, to a phone where she receives a call. Norma wipes away the blood, but the waiter hastily departs, appearing startled. As Norma answers the call, Arlington reprimands her for allowing Arthur to involve the police. Arlington is aware that Arthur has spoken to Norma's father about his license plate, leading Norma to argue that they don't want anyone to get hurt. However, Arlington rebuts, stating that they should not have pushed the button. In the midst of escalating tension, Arthur confronts the student, who has been observing him intently throughout the evening, and angrily berates him for mocking Norma. Realizing that he has caused a scene, Arthur storms out of the party, with Norma following him to their car. Upon entering the car, they notice the words "No exit" written in the frost on their windshield. Upon returning home, Norma wakes Dana and requests Arthur to take her to the hotel where she is staying while on the road. However, Dana's behavior becomes increasingly peculiar, asking strange questions such as what's pushing your buttons, and making unsettling comments like "look into the light creeping out, Arthur." Arthur inquires about the mysterious light Dana mentioned. Suddenly, Dana experiences a nosebleed and passes out, catching Arthur off guard. As he tries to revive her, he unintentionally discovers her driver's license, which reveals her real name as Sarah from Boston. Arthur rushes to Dana's hotel, where she abruptly awakens and urgently instructs him to look in the mirror to save himself. Dana hurriedly enters the hotel, and as she passes each door, startled individuals gaze down at her. She hastens to her room, where she has a large map and pictures of Norma, Arthur, and Walter. Upon returning home, Arthur asks Norma where she met Dana. Norma explains that they met on a school field trip, and Dana was from Richmond. However, Arthur startled her by showing Dana's driver's license. Norma shares the phone call with Arlington, who reveals that he has numerous employees. Late at night, Arthur finds it difficult to sleep and goes downstairs to his collection. To his astonishment, he discovers a photograph of Arlington among the old pictures of everyone involved in the camera's development. The following day, Norma receives another call from Arlington, who informs her that he knows Arthur's whereabouts. Norma expresses her desire to meet him in person, but Arlington claims he is already watching her. Norma sees a man with his mouth agape in her backyard, observing her. Meanwhile, NASA Director Martin discusses Arthur's bosses and informs them about NSA activities that involve NASA employees and are highly classified. On the other hand, Arthur visits the police station, where Norma's father reveals that Arlington's car belongs to the NSA. He also informs Arthur about the shooting of Jeffrey, who works at Langley, and his wife's death at precisely 4:45 p.m., the same time Norma pressed the button. Norma's father is perplexed, while Arthur desires more information and decides to visit the crime scene. Meanwhile, a panicked woman approaches Norma and her mother at a supermarket. She reveals that the NSA allows Arlington to conduct an experiment, and NASA is powerless against it. The test subjects are under 40, happily married, and have children. The woman hands Norma a piece of paper with a specific column number and instructs her to go to the Richmond Library. She advises Norma not to trust anyone, not even her husband, before collapsing with a nosebleed. Paramedics arrive to escort the woman out of the supermarket, leaving Norma and her mother bewildered as they are unfamiliar with the woman. Upon reaching the crime scene, Arthur discovers pictures of Arlington, a Polaroid photo of a human resources book, and a library call number. Arthur discreetly takes the Polaroid. Later that day, Norma goes to the Richmond Library to search for the given call number. Coincidentally, she spots Arthur nearby searching for something. Remembering the woman's warning, she avoids him and finds the designated call number, which leads her to a film. Simultaneously, Arthur finds the call number written on the Polaroid, which corresponds to a book titled The Lightning. After finding the book, Arthur steps out into the hallway, only to be followed by a crowd of individuals wearing startled expressions. He attempts to flee but finds himself in a vast hall filled with more peculiar individuals. There, he encounters a woman who informs him that the library is reserved for employees only. Arthur realizes that she is Clemente, Arlington's wife. She invites him to follow her into her room, where she presents him with 3 gateways made of hovering water. Clemente explains that Arlington is conducting tests with these gateways and asks Arthur to choose one carefully. Only one gateway will lead to salvation, while the other 2 will result in eternal damnation. Arthur must make a decision with the employees watching him, remembering the student who held up 2 fingers. He selects the second gateway and touches the water with his forefinger, which engulfs him. Suddenly, he finds himself swirling through a realm of whiteness. After watching a film reel showing Arlington before his disfigurement, Norma is escorted by 2 hollow-looking women to Arlington himself. Arlington reveals that he was struck by lightning, resulting in the loss of the lower part of his face. However, he now communicates with those who control the lightning. He inquires about Norma's feelings when they first met, to which she responds that she felt love. Her response surprises him, and Norma explains that her own disfigurement has caused her immense pain over the years. She cannot fathom how excruciating it must be for Arlington, whose disfigurement is more severe and cannot be easily concealed. This realization leads Norma to understand that she no longer needs to feel sorry for herself, as others like Arlington have faced even greater hardships. Arlington is uncertain how to respond to her genuine empathy, and asks her to hold his hand. However, Norma loses consciousness after doing so. Norma awakens in a bedroom to find Arthur suspended in hovering water above her. She quickly moves aside just in time as Arthur falls out of the water, which cascades down the stairs. Though confused, they clean up the mess while Walter demands an explanation of what is happening. However, they refrain from giving him an answer. In the meantime, Martin informs Norm that Arlington was struck by lightning at the platform during the Viking project on Mars. He passed away shortly after being admitted to the hospital but miraculously woke up laughing in the morgue freezer. Arlington was subsequently transferred to a high-security military hospital. They also discovered that Arlington possesses extraordinary abilities, including healing 10 times faster than average. Norma and Arthur try to put the strange events behind them as they attend the wedding. However, Arthur is unable to express what he experienced in the light, an indescribable place filled with warmth and embrace. Shortly afterward, Arthur goes outside and encounters Jeffrey, who forcibly takes him away from the party at gunpoint. Meanwhile, Walter ventures outside to search for his father, and shortly thereafter, Norma begins looking for both of them. Norma eventually finds Walter at a bridge, where 2 men have kidnapped him. While on the road, Jeffrey hands Arthur the same book he found at the crime scene. Jeffrey reveals that whatever struck Arlington has remained within him and now controls the employees, referring to the people with nosebleeds. It has embedded itself within Langley, which houses military, FBI, NASA, and CIA employees deemed useful for the experiment it is conducting. Jeffrey's daughter has also been kidnapped, mirroring Walter's situation. He reveals that these children are taken to the same motel where Dana is staying, possibly called the Harboard site, with the swimming pool serving as a gateway. As they try to make sense of the situation, a man dressed as Santa Claus appears, ringing a bell. Before they can react, a large truck suddenly emerges from the side and crashes into them. The next scene shows Arthur emerging from a NASA warehouse surrounded by military personnel, who take him into custody. They warns him that the forthcoming events will have significant consequences. Arthur and Norma return home to find Arlington waiting in their kitchen. He informs them that Walter is now blind and deaf, presenting them with 2 options. They can live with their disabled son and the money he provided, or Arthur can shoot Norma in the heart. If he does, Walter's senses will be restored, and the money will be held in a bank until his 18th birthday. Arthur takes the gun with the intention to shoot Arlington, but Arlington warns them that if he dies, Walter will endure a lifetime of agony. Before leaving, Arlington reveals that their son is in the upstairs bathroom. The couple hurries to the bathroom, only to find it locked and Walter unable to hear their calls for help. They are left with no other choice. Norma guides her husband downstairs and expresses her love for him one last time. They embrace and share a final kiss before Arthur shoots her in the heart. Simultaneously, another couple sits at a table with the button unit, contemplating their decision. Suddenly, the woman impulsively pushes the button, prompting their neighbors to call the police. As Arthur rushes upstairs to save his son, he discovers that Walter has regained his sight and hearing. The scene implies that the process will continue, with some entity being residing within Arlington testing human beings' capacity to make difficult choices in life. The test involves offering a cash prize of $1 million at the expense of another person's life. So far, no one has resisted the temptation and has failed to push the button. Arlington employs humans, manipulating them into believing it's merely an experiment. The numerous individuals experiencing nosebleeds or regaining consciousness are his employees. If people continue to fail his test, whole species will fail, making humans unworthy to live and doomed to extinction. Arlington proceeds to the other couple's house to provide them with payment, while Arthur's NASA colleagues assure him that Walter will be taken care of. Arthur is escorted away by uniformed men and placed in a black car. The film concludes with Walter gazing down at his father, while Arlington exits the couple's house, commencing the test on them. The entity controlling Arlington wasn't explained, just hinted that technology of an advanced civilization is similar to magic to a less developed civilization. That's all for today, folks. Like, share, and subscribe for more such content. Curious Knight signing off. Stay safe, stay curious.